It is entirely the fault of the center-left. The center-left is responsible for the rise of fascism. It was the case in the 1920s and 30s. It is the case against today. In the 1920s, remember Ramsay MacDonald? Who was it that espoused on behalf of the working class the process of austerity that crushed the British working class well before the Second World War? It was a Labour government, the first Labour government under Ramsay MacDonald. Similarly, who was it that unleashed the evil, dark forces of the City of London? It was Gordon Brown together with Tony Blair. It was the center-left. Who created Trump? Obama. Obama was elected at the end of 2008. This yes we can business. What was it that he said we can do? Put the financial genie back into the bottle and look after the victims of Wall Street. He did exactly the opposite. The first thing he did when he entered the White House, he employed Larry Summers and Tim Geithner with a remit to save the bankers while imposing harsh austerity on the vast majority of the Americans under the ideology of a stimulus that was a figment of his imagination. And therefore, you've got discontent. And when the left is responsible for, siding with the, effectively with the bankers and the capitalists who caused the crisis and the discontent, the center-left becomes their lackey. And then this discontent grows beyond control.
So,
and then a Mussolini, a Hitler, an Orban, a Trump, a Le Pen stands on a soapbox and says, give me absolute power and I'm going to get them and I'm going to make you proud again. So, this is the sad fact. And now allow me just to add one more note. Look, power has a lure that requires basic ethical standards in order to be able to resist it. Matthew, when I in my first week as finance minister, in that very exceptional time when the people of Greece put somebody like me in that position to negotiate with the IMF and and Washington and Brussels and so on, it was remarkable how well trained the representatives of these financial institutions and the creditors and big capital, how well trained they are to lure you in. I remember a discussion with Christine Lagarde, who was then the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, who really startled me because, I was there ready to give her all my arguments as to why this harsh austerity was killing our people and it was killing our economy and it was really not even good for our creditors. And she stopped me when we were just the two of us. And she said, Yanis, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. What we have done in your country is indefensible. It can't work. It can't work. Do you hear that? It can't work. Not that it's difficult to make it work. It can't work. So suddenly I felt, my God, my work has been done. And then she added, but Yanis, you have to know that we have invested so much into this. We can't go back. And your credibility and career, she was telling me as a friend, depends on you coming on board.
Going along with it. Wow.
It's very easy to convince yourself, not that you're a bad guy and that you're going to betray your people, but that, look, if I go along with them, then, okay, it will be bad for my people, but if it's me implementing these policies, I will do some good as well. So it's really, there is nothing easier than fooling yourself that by betraying the left, you are doing the left's job. And this is why people like Obama, I'm not saying that they were evil people that wanted to go into the White House in order to destroy the American working class and bring Trump to the White House. No, but this is effectively what they did. My good friend, this is the beauty and the ugliness of the human condition. No one knows. It is unknowable. We are not pundits. You and I are not sitting here watching the weather and trying to predict it. Because unlike the weather, who doesn't give a damn about our predictions, the outcome of social movements, of human endeavors, is the result of human endeavors. So you and I, it's up to us to shape history. Not necessarily in the way that we want, but at least to shape it. Well, it's not true. The left has produced remarkable figures from time immemorial. Think of William Morris. Letters from nowhere. Think of Noam Chomsky. Think of Edward Said, the great Palestinian writer. Well, 1991 was a major defeat for all of us, independently of whether you supported the Soviet Union or not. because the collapse of the Soviet Union was the end. It was the death of the communist movement, at least in Europe and the United States. It was very difficult to defend yourself being a communist because the Soviet people did not get out into the streets to defend the workers' Soviet Republic. So how could we defend it? But then something else happened. Social Democrats, or in the United States, New Dealers, went to ground as well. Because with the conversion of traditional capitalism into financialized capitalism, the center of gravity shifted away from industry towards the banking sector, with the exorbitant and exuberance of the financial sector, which led, of course, to capitalism's own Waterloo in 2008. But between 1991 and 2008, you had this blancmange of a theory, of an ideology that, it's a new paradigm, and financialization is going to make everyone rich, and and the world has become a global village, and everybody's going to get better off, and poverty has been eliminated. And that what was going on, however, during that period was that with the center of gravity shifting from industry to finance, it was impossible to have a New Deal. It was impossible to have a social democracy because the New Deal, Roosevelt, LBJ in the United States, or Harold Wilson and Willy Brandt and Bruno Kreisky, the Social Democrats in Europe, their job was to play the role of the referee, to sit the captains of industry on one side of the table and the trade unions on the other and cut a deal between them. But when power shifted away from the industrial captains and to the bankers, it was impossible to do that. So social democracy went to ground itself. And then when we had a few opportunities to rise up after the demise of capitalism, the major defeat of capitalism in 2008, what did we do? I was part of this, and this is self-criticism. We went to New York and we occupied Wall Street, and we spent 5 hours discussing whether we should sell sandwiches from the canteen in the middle of the occupation. And the Wall Street bankers used that time in order to reconfigure the policy and to rebuild their power. Then when
with taxpayer cash.
Yes, indeed, of course, with $35,000 billion of it, maybe 35 trillion. That was quantitative easing. Now, when and that again is self-critical, when the people of Greece gave us a remarkable opportunity in 2015, and let me just make this point: we were a party of 4%. In 2009, right?
The Syriza.
Yes, 4%. By January 2015, the very conservative, very, very careful, reluctant for radical change people of Greece took us from 4% to 36%. We were in government for five months. We fought against financialized capital, against the Troika, against the creditors and so on. Okay, and when we called the referendum, when they sought their support in that struggle, they took us from 36% to 62%. And my prime minister on that night surrendered, essentially defected to the financialized cabal. And then, of course, people turn around and say, excuse the French, bugger off. We are not going to take you seriously anymore. So, when it's like a surfer, if you miss the big wave, you have to struggle in the cold waters until the next one comes, hoping that you will be ready for the next one. Exactly. And the linchpin of my argument is that capital became so triumphant. It steamrolled over us, the left, over the trade unions movements, over liberal democracy. And like a rather idiotic virus that became too lethal for its own boots, it killed off its host. So it was capital that overthrew capitalism, which is a delicious contradiction, of course. And at the same time, the predicament that we're facing, because what Elon Musk, and not so much Elon Musk, but Jeff Bezos more so than Elon Musk, and Google, and all these platforms in China as well, Alibaba and Baidu and so on, what they have, which Henry Ford, Thomas Edison didn't have, is this new form of mutated capital, which are called cloud capital. Because all forms of capital hitherto have been produced means of production. whether it was a plow or a tractor or an industrial robot, is a machine that we built to build other to do other things with it, to produce either machines or food or whatever. Produced means of production. But what lives inside your tablet, your phone, your computer, through the optic fiber cables and the server farms and so on, is a new form of capital which produces nothing except for the power to manipulate our behavior, to modify our behavior. And anyone who owns that is a capitalist who owns that particular form of capital, let's call them cloudalists or cloud capitalists or techno-feudal lords, they have a power that Henry Ford could never have dreamt of. And therefore, by replacing markets with cloud thieves or digital platforms like Amazon, they are replacing capitalist profit, with a new form of rent, like the old feudal lords, the landed gentry, extracted ground rent from everyone, from artisans, from peasants, and so on. These people extract what I call cloud rent. So they have essentially, without realizing it, well, there was no conspiracy, no plan here. It simply evolved in the same way that capitalism evolved out of feudalism. There was no conspiracy there either. They've created a new system, which I call techno-feudalism. No, it's capital. It's capital. In the same way that, as I said, there was no democratic decision or not even a conspiracy of very few people back in the 18th century to bring out capitalism from feudalism. It simply evolved as a result of technological change in navigation, the creation of the steam engine, the enclosures in Britain, and so on, that brought about this transformation of society whereby once upon a time under in the feudal age, power came out of land ownership, and it came in the form of rent, of ground rent. But, by the 19th century, especially the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, it was ownership of the machines, of capital, that allowed you to have this new form of wealth creation or wealth extraction, profit. And now we moved from capital and profit to cloud capital and a new form of cloud rent. Well, Stefan, I don't believe that there is such a thing as AI. AI is a marketing term. Technically, if you look at it, the evolution of what used to be cybernetics, if you recall, back in the 1960s, into machine learning, that happened a long time before we even talked about AI. AI is a marketing term. It really doesn't mean much, except if you want to think of it in terms of ChatGPT. But the work of the techno-feudal lords had already been done well before OpenAI produced this silly little bot that allows you to plagiarize in newfangled ways. What Google, think of the Amazon algorithm, which has been around well before you and I have been waxing lyrical or not so lyrical about AI. It has been doing something absolutely magnificent and horrible at the same time. It has been training us through Alexa, through its interface. Every time you like something, a book, a bicycle, whatever on Amazon, you're training it to train you, to train it, to train you, to train it, to train you, to train it to know you well, so that it gives you good book recommendations and electric bicycle recommendations, win over your trust. And then once it does that, it does something remarkable, something that no capital could ever do in the past. It can input desires into your bosom. It can make you want stuff, and you trust it to do it because it has given you good advice in the past. And then once you have that desire, it can satiate your desire by selling the stuff directly to you outside of any market, because Amazon is not a market, right? It's a trading platform, but it is a completely hierarchical, top-down organization that resembles more the Soviet system. So,
that gives Jeff Bezos a power like no oligarch before, if you're saying he can input desires into our chests.
Exactly. He can bypass markets. He actually bypasses markets. He uses Amazon in order to destroy markets, in order to make sure that even the capitalists who exploit labor in the standard way that Karl Marx described so beautifully, even they are vassals to Bezos, because, he charges them 40%. So in the end, the capitalist profit is not even retained by the capitalist. It goes to the cloud capitalist, to the tech lord. And, this has repercussions. Even you may be watching and say, well, I don't care because I don't use Amazon. It doesn't matter. Because when you have around, this is my estimate, 30% of total income being siphoned off the circular flow of income, and it goes into the pockets of the Jeff Bezoses of the world. That money never comes back to the circular flow of income. So that means that aggregate demand for goods and services in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, and so on, shrinks. Because it's out of the circular flow of income, which means that the Fed has to print more dollars in order to maintain the level of economic activity that is inflationary. So even if you have an old Nokia phone and you are never part of this cloud capital world, your life is detrimentally affected. The capital that they own. Because think about it, Henry Ford, right? I mean, he was an egomaniac. He was quite fascistic in his
anti-Semite, yeah.
Anti-Semite. He was ruthless. He was absolutely. He bought a newspaper, I believe the Dearborn something, in order to influence politics. He influenced municipal politics. He made sure that the streetcars would be ripped out so that his own buses and cars and trucks would dominate the roads. So in that sense, he sounds very much like Elon Musk, doesn't he? Except that he wanted you to buy something that was rolling off his production lines, his own traditional produced means of production. He wanted you to buy the stuff that his factory made, which his workers built, and which those workers could also buy with credits from Ford. Now, when it comes to Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk through Twitter in particular, right? They don't want you to buy anything that they produce. They simply have this form of capital which allows them direct access to your brain. They don't have to go through the municipality, through the newspaper. I mean, Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post, but that's a hobby, more or less. He's got his algorithm, which is hardwired now into your brain through Alexa and all the wire services that he has. So that is a profound difference between those folks and Henry Ford or Thomas Edison. But allow me to just add that one thing. Until Musk purchased Twitter, and a lot of people were surprised that he would do that. He would pay, 44 billion, whatever. It was peanuts for him. For him, it was essential to buy Twitter because up until then, he was a traditional, old-fashioned capitalist. He made stuff. He made cars. And, rockets. I mean, very interesting and, loud stuff. But it was still very much in the tradition of the old pedestrian capital as produced means of production. He needed to enter the world of cloud capital, and Twitter allowed him to do that. And what he saw in Twitter, and that's quite brilliant on his behalf, brilliant and evil at the same time. He saw an opportunity to create an everything app, an app that is hardwired into our brains and which potentially allows him to create his own payment system that bypasses Wall Street. So, Henry Ford would never have imagined any of that. Here I'm going to give you a very old-fashioned answer. Ever since Marx pointed out the manner in which capitalism, the accumulation of capital, is detrimental to the interest of society as a whole, even to capitalists, because in the end they become sad bastards because the only thing they worry about and they can't sleep at night and they lose their soul is that they will go bankrupt if they don't squeeze the living daylights out of their proletarian labor, because if they don't, somebody else will, and they will get bankrupt. Ever since Marx highlighted the collective madness that is capitalism, the answer to the question is, well, the machines are not the problem. The machines can liberate us to the extent that they can do chores that we don't like doing much faster and better and allow us to, read poetry and listen to music and do whatever. The solution, and therefore the answer to your question, is the socialization of the means of production. These machines should belong to all of us so that we can all share in the fruits of their labor. So the machines become our slaves, not we, their slaves. And therefore, I just extend this. I'm not against having cloud capital. Cloud capital is brilliant. I don't have a problem with AI. The question is, who owns it? And
so you are of the view that the big tech companies should be treated more like public utilities?
Indeed. And let me give you an example. Why doesn't, you're in Washington, D.C., I'm in Athens, why can't our municipalities own their own algorithm, their own cloud capital? So instead of having Uber and Airbnb and, use Bank of America or Citigroup payment applications, why can't our municipality provide local coders with the opportunity to write beautiful code for the municipality, and we citizens of our districts, of our towns, who can, through a democratic process, decide, let's say, the equivalent publicly owned Airbnb, how many weeks or months a year we want houses and flats and apartments to be rented, so that we don't have the complete devastation of the housing sector. Why should the taxi drivers that use these apps today for Uber, who get skinned by Uber, absolutely skinned, and whose life is not worth living as a result of the private ownership of the Uber algorithm, why can't that be municipally owned? And the application for the equivalent of Uber, the public version of it, can be optimized so that we minimize traffic congestion and optimize, the incomes of taxi drivers. Every single technology, if you take, my phone, for instance, right? Whatever brand it is, every single technology in here, from the touch screen to the Wi-Fi to the microchip,
state subsidized,
everything in it was developed by some government grant. All you did was you managed to put together the work of others that was publicly funded. You see, that is a common fallacy that is motivated, of course. It's a motivated spiel by the oligarchs. They like to present the world in which we live as one that is populated by all these beautiful artifacts that are privately produced, and then the bad state comes or the public, and socializes them or taxes them. No, it's exactly the opposite. Everything of value we've ever produced is collectively manufactured, collectively invented, and then those with power privatize it. Well, I think there's a lot of myth involved in it. And I never personalized my political campaigns. If it wasn't Musk, it would have been somebody else. Indeed, I think that Musk is the least interesting and least influential of the tech roles. He's the loudest. He's the one that has a White House with Doge, and he wreaks havoc, federal government, and so on. But he's not the most significant of the tech lords. Peter Thiel is a more dangerous individual than Elon Musk. And I think that Jeff Bezos is the most powerful of them all. If you look at the extent of cloud capital that he possesses. And if anything, Elon Musk has produced some things of value. Like, for instance, I wouldn't be talking to you if it wasn't for Starlink. And I don't want to advertise Starlink. The only reason why I have it, I'll tell you why I have it, is because I live here in Athens, very close to the American embassy, and because of who I am, I wouldn't have access to the internet if I didn't have Starlink.
Okay. That's a new one.
So, but allow me you said something earlier, which I agree with, and I'll take it a bit further. You said, and I think very succinctly, that, at least Elon Musk, by buying into Twitter and becoming engulfed in the Trumpist campaign, he has revealed that he's a fascist. And that we should welcome, because it is important to have clarity about who these people are. But I'm going to go a bit further. These techno-feudal lords, including Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, maybe so Peter Thiel, have exposed the great lie of liberal democracy, of liberal capitalism. Peter Thiel has explicitly said something with which I agree entirely. He said that capitalism and democracy are incompatible. He's completely correct on this. That's why he wants capitalism without democracy, which means fascism. Okay, but at least we can agree on that. What I really cannot stand is all this soft rightist defense of conglomerate power on the basis that it is a powerful good and it can become even green. Remember all that rubbish about the green transition coming out of the voluntary transformation of ExxonMobil into a green tech company. That's when I would lose my will to live. When I have somebody like Peter Thiel and like Elon Musk, who are clearly children of South African apartheid, who are clearly pursuing without limits, the white supremacist logic. This is why they are supporting apartheid in Israel. This is why they are so morbidly monospheric and patriarchal and chauvinistic and utterly sexist. They are clear. They come clean on this, and you can face them. You can respect them as in the same way that you would respect Mussolini in the battlefields of Europe in the 1940s and, fight it out. Well, firstly, you need not to do what the Democrats did last November or the last 4 years before Trump won. The Democrats, remember, looked at the people in the eye and said, you've never had it so good. And please celebrate the wonderful economic management that we have administered when people were suffering. And Trump turned around and said, I feel your pain. This is carnage. He's been saying this since 2016. So what we need to do is look at the people in the eye, like, people like Bernie Sanders and AOC have been doing, say, we understand, but here is the deal. If you want to change the system which causes you pain, you need to attack the cause of the pain, not the symptom itself. So this is not a question of palliative care. This is what we need to do. Firstly, we need to get rid of the financial power of Wall Street. It has happened before. Franklin Roosevelt essentially socialized the banks, and he put the bankers into a mental prison for decades. That's why they hated him. Well, we need to do this. We need to socialize cloud capital. We need to ensure that people like Musk and Jeff Bezos and so on, they realize that there is a mass of people out there who are not going to stand for the public funding of their private techno-feudal empires, that we are going to take over the machines from them, that they didn't build them themselves, they are the result of collective human endeavor, and they have to become the slaves of humanity, not to enslave humanity. Well, if you look at people like Musk and Thiel and Katz and others, they just look at the roots. They come from the white supremacist South African apartheid regime. There's nothing new there, but it's not just them. If you think of, what did the British do when they approached the southeastern coast of Australia in 1788? The fleet, the first fleet. They looked at the large continent of Australia, where there were about 6 million natives living. They declared it a terra nullius, a land without a people. That's what it means, empty land. And they said, okay, it's ours. That's the first step to genocide. And this is what the Germans did in Namibia. This is what the French did throughout Africa. And the Dutch did in Indonesia. There is a tradition in Europe and amongst white Europeans, whether they are WASPs or Catholics or whatever, there is a tradition of genocide. Therefore, think of the Zionist slogan, a land without a people for a people without a land. So, we are looking at the Palestinians, they're not people. And this is a land without a people, so it's ours, because God promised it to us. That's the first step to a genocide, to say that this is a land without, saying that this is a land without a people is the first step to genocide. So, in all the historical truth, there is a very close coalescence between the mindset of the European, how was the United States built? It was built by effectively carrying out a massive genocide of Native Americans. So they think, okay, well, we've done that. And you see, when they hear you and me talk about equal political rights from the river to the sea, they get really scared. Because for them, equality is the most potent and threatening word in the English language. Why? Yes. Because they know that they live on stolen land. Look at the Australians. 2 years ago, there was a puny little referendum that if it had passed, it would have given the surviving native First Nations Australians, Aborigines, it would have given the right to have a committee that could advise Parliament on matters concerning the native Australians. And the white Australian and immigrant population voted convincingly against it, because they know that if they do it, they know it's subconscious, but it's there. They're subconscious. That if they acknowledge at all the need for equality, that there hasn't been equality, it's like saying that, we live on stolen land. I say to my friends on the left who support Putin, who supported Saddam Hussein in the past, is that, my enemy's enemy is not necessarily my friend, mate.
Well said.
Right? and here, I'm aghast at this situation because I'm constantly being attacked on both sides. Yeah, I mean, look, I remember 1982, 1981, I was being beaten up with my comrades in London outside the Iraqi embassy because we were demonstrating against Saddam Hussein. Back then, Saddam Hussein was the blue-eyed boy of the West. He was their man in the Middle East. They loved him. Dick Cheney would send him chemical weapons, and he knows that he had them because he kept the receipts, right?